My name is Amy. I'm a product designer at CryptoKitties, AxiomZen. AxiomZen, we actually made CryptoKitties, so I actually worked on a bunch of projects before we started CryptoKitties, so if you have any questions about kind of how that started, let me know. I don't actually draw the cats on CryptoKitties. Instead, what I do is actually look a lot at the world around CryptoKitties. So in terms of product design, the core game components, I think a lot of you guys can understand like game design, but what I do a lot of thinking around is, onboarding, first experience, user expectations, new experience, and like how do you support the game in general. I think there were a couple themes that came up earlier about like in-game items, the Kittyverse, I'll talk about that in a little bit. But there's kind of two things I want to talk about today. So one is like, how do you design good experiences? Like I have a background in UX design, and I want to bring some of that into blockchain. It seems like a little bit of the Wild West right now, and then I want to talk a little bit about new opportunities and the new paradigm of technology of blockchain. So there was a time when this was okay, and we all thought it was fine. And I had like an LG phone, my friend had an Ericsson phone, and we're like, cool, I'll just have my own charger. But if good experience looks like this, where you design something but people don't use it that way, like how can we learn from this to design better experiences for the future? So, I mean, this isn't the best solution, but it's actually a pretty good one. I have my Switch at home. I can use that charger to charge my MacBook. I can use that charger to charge my friend's Pixel. Pretty cool. So how do we get there? When we're building games right now, right now, it's a relatively simple amount of steps, but actually there's a lot more. You need to learn about you need to help your users learn about the blockchain, tell them how to back up your key. They need to understand what is cryptocurrency, like what is Ethereum, why do I need to care about it? Gas fees, sorry, the thing went weird there, the G went weird, but like why do I need to pay gas fees? What is a transaction fee? And then like the transaction time. So when we launched CryptoKitties, a lot of people were getting stuck. So we actually merely just added a little like network is good on the top, and that really helped out, and people really understood like what was happening to the network, even though they didn't know what the network was exactly. So a little bit of, as we move forward, because there's so little about how to design for blockchain games, there's a couple things we need to realize about what the needs of the machine is versus what the needs of the user is. So there's certain things that we need to build as like game designers, which is how do I what is your public key so that I can send my item to you, or you need to pay this gas fee. But from a user perspective, they don't really understand those things. So how do we kind of make things a little bit more user-friendly, understandable in like a human-readable language? So how do you separate the experience itself from the technology? So there's a lot of new concepts. So I want to talk a little bit about them, and then like how do we approach them moving forward? So concepts like gas prices. I think MetaMask thought that introducing the concept of Ngai would simplify it, because it's like 0.000 something ETH. But really what it does is actually just add extra cognitive load. So bear in mind, like when you're introducing new concepts, this is going to add more learning to the initial learning of your game. Safety is also a huge concern in a decentralized system. Like, people need to take care of their keys. They also need to recognize that if they lose their key, they're going to lose everything, like not just their items, but all of the money that they put into Ethereum itself. Here we see, like the middle one's not too bad. They actually say no backup, no Ethereum. But the first one here, this is like a 5-page like terms of service, and right in the middle there, I think it says like, if you lose your private key, we cannot help you. You need to back this up. And like, of course you're not gonna read that. I just like swiped through it and I was like, oh shoot, I need to keep this. And like Jack's wallet is actually a pretty good wallet in general, but they don't really warn users about that. And then like Toshi as well, they allow you to skip this and say like, yeah, I've read it, but that's not really necessarily great. So Sarah Mills from Consensus, I think there's a couple of you guys here. Oh shoot, wow, that just didn't turn out very nice. Sorry about the slides. Sometimes they're not working. But what she says is a big part of designing for blockchain is actually just looking legit. We need consistent visual design, nothing frilly in terms of animation, but none of this is like really new information. All of this is like usability heuristics. This is like Nielsen and Norman, they talk about like how do we use what people understand and in usability and design and interface design, and how do we bring that over to blockchain? So first off, let's design good feedback. So we know that things are going to be slow. Let's just tell users that things happening right now. If you can be more nuanced, that's great. Emphasize security. So I've had a lot of conversations internally about, when we're onboarding someone to the game, how do we, let's just like get them to the game right away. But I always come back and say, we need to emphasize things like this, because if you do lose your key, this is a really big deal. So let's like make sure that we educate users at the forefront. Which brings me to this, education. We want to minimize cognitive load. So let's tell them enough so that they know how to keep themselves safe. But you don't really necessarily need to tell everything. So this is kind of up to you and your team. Define your values of what you think is important. Tell that to the user so that you can they can just kind of go through a little bit more easy. When you use things like this, like data needs to help support your argument. So if you do show something like this, it needs to enhance the user experience or emphasize something that you're saying. Otherwise, you can actually just not show that. Anticipate mistakes. There are no takebacks in blockchain. So once you hit go, make sure once you hit go, you can't take it back. So just make sure that you've got like confirmation screens, things like that. And finally, designing systems. So I think Gabby touched a little bit on this. There was this like big revolution in design like in the last couple of years, and it started with this thing called atomic design. We thought a lot about systems. Google's making it a lot easier for new designers to design like interfaces in general. Apple does this with their style guidelines. This is from IDEO Collab. What they did was they took the concept of gas prices and turned it from this to this, and they actually turned it into a bit more like usable, human readable language. So like you don't really need to know what gas fees are. You just need to know that if you pay a little bit more, it'll be faster. Cool. Let's actually build more of these things into the system of how we build games, so that as we share these learnings, all games would be a lot more useful and understandable. Ultimately, you need to give your team like the time and space to learn with your engineers. That's what we found in our exploration. Getting to an MVP will take way longer than anticipated, because there's like nothing that's really good practice right now. There's a lot more engineering and security implications. Before you can just set your engineers and go, but now, because there's like all these like other steps in the middle, you need to anticipate all of them, and you need to make sure you explore all the different options. You'll likely need to work with third parties, so make friends with all the people around you, because you're probably going to use one of their tools. But when you do things like this, and you want to make sure that the users get the best experience, make sure you can like maybe fake those interactions. So for example, when we're doing a lot of exploration with CryptoKitties, like we can't just user test the game itself. We have to user test with MetaMask. How do you get a wallet? Okay, how do you get ETH now? Okay, now you can play the game. And then there's a lot more you need to do in terms of legal. So because this is a technology for finance, make sure you find a good lawyer and you're really good friends with them. Cool. So next I want to talk a little bit about the new paradigm of technology. So, in putting together today's talk, I just want to talk a little bit about usability heuristics and how do you apply good design. But the other thing I do want to talk about is the actual design of the game itself and how we sort of approach it and what our thinking is around it. And I think, John, you pulled out that Kittyverse page, and I'm going to bring that up too. But yeah, so smart contracts allowed for us to take a game that traditionally was, just a trading card game and collectibles, and turn it into a more interactive game. So everything is algorithmically generated, from the bio to how the cats look, and that's actually really cool. It's something that only the digital technology, that blockchain technology, has allowed us to do. So the way that we had been exploring CryptoKitties and how it goes beyond just a collectibles game and even a breeding game, we thought a lot about it. A couple of us are thinking a lot about it in the perspective of art. So this guy sold at Christie's auction, I think for $140,000, which is insane. We didn't expect that at all, but the concept was to push forward digital items, but also talk about it in how it relates to physical items. So the reason we brought it to Christie's auction was that sure, you can draw a picture of a cat, but, what does it actually mean? So when Gile, he's actually the artist who draws all the CryptoKitties, brought this to Christie's auction, he came with it with this perspective. You know, blockchain has the potential to change the course of digital art. And what was interesting was that afterwards he had a bit of a Q&A. You know, a bunch of the people in the audience were like, "Oh, is this even really art? Like, does this even like constitute as art? You're not even, you don't get it, man." And he was like, "What are you talking about?" So these guys are really interesting. These guys are Data. They're one of the first guys to do art on the blockchain. The cool thing about them is that you have to draw using their platform, which is really interesting because the concept of, you know, tokenizing some art that you drew on, say, Photoshop, like, is that really what constitutes art on the blockchain? Like, if a file exists on your computer and then you can tokenize it, is it really digitally scarce? Because maybe I can like take that piece of art and I can like tokenize it again and maybe call it something else. So the concept that they're using, like you have to use their platform to tokenize it, which I think is pretty cool. But you know, like a lot of the games themselves, they're predominantly like collectible games. You know, I think John, you talked a little bit about like Decentraland and like Axie Infinity. They're doing other really cool things with the items themselves. These guys, this is John Orion Young. He's an artist as well. He's doing some really cool things, I think. What is he doing? He's like I don't think you own the piece of art that you buy. You like own it for a while, but it goes immediately back on sale and the next person can buy it. And I don't know, it's really cool concepts that people are doing. But you know, how do you go beyond the collectibles? When Pokemon, you know, Pokemon came out like this, yeah, you can like collect the cards, but really, this is the core game mechanics. But what if you could take that and, you know, bring it into Pokemon Stadium? Like, I thought this was the coolest thing when it came out, and I was like, I'm gonna put my Pokemon in here and play with it. But what if, like, the card itself, you can like play all these games on top of it? So, you know, the concept of Kittyverse, we heard this earlier, but a lot of people are taking those items and they're like building games on top of it, and this is what we really want to encourage, because we know that CryptoKitties was cool, right? Like, you know, one of the first games on the blockchain, one of the first games I did collectibles, but we know it's not gonna exist forever on its own. And you know, you guys brought up the concept of community. We really want to encourage this, because beyond the single game, like, how do you build these experiences on top that, you know, maybe right now they just play with CryptoKitties, but maybe in the future they play with like a lot of other collectibles. So we think that's really cool. But yeah, so last couple thoughts here. I know I talk really fast, so I think that only took like 10 minutes. But designing experiences around digital ownership. I think we're probably gonna hear a lot about this today, like how do we encourage community? How do we encourage, how do we push forward that concept of digital ownership and create experiences around that? Not just in, you know, me buying this because I think it's valuable, but me buying this because I truly, really love the item. Let's apply usability heuristics. Let's make sure that, you know, that users need to have user speak and human speak and not machine speak, so that when they're learning about different things like gas, we don't need to say the word gas. We can say the word like transaction fees. Transaction that, you know, what I think we called it service fee, or like, I think in CryptoKitties, it was something a little bit more human, which is cool. And, you know, totally, it's gonna be the Wild West for a little while. I think that's okay. I think a lot of things will come up as we start developing these games. And I think the important thing for all of us in the room to do is actually just keep writing those Medium articles, keep posting into the different communities. Like the IDEO Collab guys, like that's not a new idea, but not that many people wrote about it. And so once they write about it, like we all now know, like, okay, cool, like let's use like the words, you know, slow, medium, fast to talk about gas. Because at the end of the day, right, like if we want to learn from our mistakes, we don't want to have games that look like this. We just want games to look like this. Thanks.